The digital art era is here. AI and art creation tools empower anyone to make it. Blockchain technologies allow anyone to own it. VR, AR, and extended reality immerse us in it. Let's talk to artists and innovators behind the visual magic. I'm your host, Roger Dickerman. Welcome to the future of art. Today, we welcome Shavonne Wong. Shavonne is an artist, 3D virtual model creator, and co-founder of NFT Asia. She was Vogue's first NFT cover. She's sold on Sotheby's. She's been collected by Idris Elba, and she's exhibited in Singapore, Paris, and beyond. Try listening to this interview and not coming away inspired. Not in Shavonne's word, a fantastical sense, but in a pragmatic sense. She talks empathy, realism, a willingness to be cringe, and she provides a very real path to going out there and getting it as an artist. Let's get to it. Shavonne Wong, welcome to the future of art.
Thank you for having me, Roger.
This has been forever in the making, certainly at least a calendar year. I remember we were talking related to NFT origin stories about having you as a guest, and we've talked plenty off air, and now we're here.
Yes. It's been a crazy time, hasn't it been?
It's been a very
so
crazy
much has
time.
happened. Yeah. I'm glad it's finally happening. Like, I've always enjoyed chatting with you, so yay.
Likewise. And I'm going to start you with a question to quiet all the craziness and focus on our North Star, which of course is the future of art. But Shavonne, what does art mean to you?
Art to me is an expression of self. So I'm gonna give you a little story, okay? I remember when I was younger, I used to be very intimidated by art, not in the sense of like creativity, but in the sense of going to museums and going to galleries. Because every time I had entered one of these beautiful white rooms and looked at the beautifully displayed art, when I don't understand it, I often feel like it's my fault, right? So like I've always felt intimidated by art because like sometimes, it feels like I'm a pleb. I'm an uncultured little pleb who doesn't understand the art. And so it was actually really interesting for me because when I was in Venice, I was looking at this little book that was in a bookstore. Obviously, a book was for kids, but anyway, I digress. I was looking at this little book, and this book was about art. And the book was basically explaining like what is abstract art. It is just, some artists threw paint on the wall until they were happy, and then that was it. What is a sculpture? Someone chipped away at wood or cheese, whatever made them happy, and then when they were done, they were done. And it made me realize that I just press buttons on my computer a lot of buttons, and then when I'm done, and that's really is just us little happy dorks doing happy little things, and to me that is art. So yeah, the expression of self.
Beautiful expression of self, and a very relatable one.
Yes.
Now, from someone who was once intimidated by art or the comprehension of art or what went into art, all the way now to present day, you coming off your recent solo exhibition, right? NFT Factory Paris. Talk to us about that, how that all come together.
So, I think it was really cool that I feel like so much of the NFT space is really about physical meetings, and so many of the relationships are really built from that. So for me, I was very fortunate that, I did my own solo exhibition earlier this year in Singapore. I posted it extensively, and I had people from Paris pay attention to it. And then when I went to non-fungible conference in Lisbon, I also got to meet people from NFT Factory and Benoit, and you meet friendships and good relationships and connections, and that was really just how it all came to be. After I came back to Singapore, they were like, "Do you want a solo exhibition?" And I'm like, "Yes, of course I do. Of course I want a solo exhibition." And that was how it happened. And to be honest, like before this year, I never had a solo exhibition, so this is my second solo this year. And it really is just so flattering, to know that people are interested in my work enough. Obviously the one I did this year was completely organized by me, so like when people attended it was like, oh my god, thank you for attending this thing that I had organized, right? But to have then someone else reach out and say, hey, would you like a solo exhibition, we'll host it for you, like it's another level of validation. So yeah, it's great. I no complaints. Yeah.
Your communication around your solo exhibition, specifically the one in Singapore, taking that step back, has really impressed me. And it actually interrelates to how you answered the art question. You had said you were once intimidated by it, but your answer came from a perspective of approachability, right? Breaking it down to its simplest concepts and making it very approachable. How you communicate on social media and your just general philosophy impresses me, because you make concepts approachable. And I'd love for you to talk about marketing, because I think you've done an amazing job of breaking down the wall between when someone from the outside looking in perceives a gallery, a solo exhibition. Oftentimes that person has no idea, well, how does such a thing come together? It feels like such a gray area. It feels like such a leap. But how you just answered that question relative NFT Factory Paris, you said, I was asked. I said yes. And then in Singapore, breaking that wall down and saying, hey, I took it upon myself to go market myself, to get out there, to make sure people understood and were aware that I was doing it, that they were aware that I had work going on. I found that to be so important. Could you dive in a little bit?
Yeah, again, thank you for that. That was really nice. But I guess for me, it's like because I came from photography days, right? So like I had 10 years where I was a freelancer, where I was doing fashion photography. And I think every creative, when we first enter, the job world, where we are now doing creativity for pay, there is a sense of like, oh, if you do good work, they will come. Like we've all heard this line. And very soon after, you really realize that that is not true. Like people cannot hire you if they don't know you exist. People cannot buy your art, they don't know you exist. And at a certain amount, at the start, I think everybody has a slight entitlement of like, I just work really hard, what do you mean they don't care? But you realize that the world really just owes you nothing, and if anything, you kind of have to go out there and get it, right? And so I think a lot in life, like there's so many beautiful, glamorous things that we see on the media. We see all this highlight reels on Instagram. We see all of the things that people achieve. And I think what I've realized is so much of it really is from a grind that is just very tedious and very unglamorous. Like for me, back in my photography days, I remember when I could not get jobs, I get very frustrated because in my head, I'm doing everything that I was supposed to be doing already. And I had spoken to my husband, who was a lot more in the business world, and he's like, you should contact more people, cold email people, reach out to people, right? And that was when I was like, okay, I will try to do that, right? And I would write like cold emails and send it out to thousands of people. I'll do this like once every few months, right? Just to make sure people are updated. I'll reach out to different agencies. I'll reach out to different magazines, etc. And whenever I traveled, I would also reach out to everybody that I could know in the certain country and let them know, hey, I'm gonna be there. I would love to work with blah blah blah. Can we do something together? And that was really how I ended up being able to photograph Billy Porter. And then eventually that shoot ending up in Vogue. Like it all really just came from just really emailing people until like someone says yes. And and I think sometimes that part of it isn't really explained to people, that everybody can kind of do this. You just have to be willing to be cringe. You have to just follow up an amount of times that you feel like you shouldn't be following up, because you realize that on your end, that even if you get emails, you kind of forget about them and you don't realize that you've forgotten about them. It's realizing that even though you're the main character in your own life, you're not the main character in everybody else's life. And that means you have to put in the effort to be at the top of their mind. If you want them to think about you, you have to make sure they think about you, right? So I think that plays a lot into the marketing, where you try and empathize how people think. You try and empathize how people are. Like for me, I believe that collectors are incredibly busy people. who probably get way too many DMs that they have to go through. And oftentimes when they look at artists, they think, oh, I'm interested in this artist, but I can't figure out what's the artist's history. I can't figure out what's the artist been up to, because on Twitter, like, it is really hard to be kept up to date to what they're up to, right? So for me, then I would create a deck every 6 months that gives them up to date of, like, what I have been up to, so you can easily see what I've been up to, right? So I think stuff like that, you're trying to figure out how to fill the holes that people might have when they're trying to find out about you. And I think having that view of understanding where they are coming from helps a lot with that.
It's a beautiful quote, paraphrasing, you're the main character in your own story, but understanding that you are not to others. I think that's a very, very powerful position. It's a very real position, also a very powerful position to come from. You're assuming nothing, you're taking nothing for granted, and you're taking control of the situation. One thing that I will say is that while it may feel, I am absolutely raising my hand. I'm a victim of this in my past, assuming, oh, I'm grinding harder than others, than most others, it will come. And I agree with you. That's absolutely not true. It's very rare. And I think you have to get lucky for that to be true. And it's much more productive to assume that that's not true. And I think, at least speaking personally, I would fall into a trap of thinking I would be cringe of sharing more of myself. And I don't think that's always the case. And spinning this around, you, Shavonne, whenever you've shared things on socials, or whenever we've DM'd back and forth about various pieces of art, I've never found you to be cringe. I've always found you to be in control of your own story and telling it quite well. Do you feel that came with time? Do you feel that came with time and repetition?
Definitely. I think for myself, even when talking about my art now, I still feel a little but it's just, you just gotta like push down that feeling and be able to talk about it, right? Because it's also, to me, one of those things that, like, if you, the artist, are not the one representing your art well, who will represent it better, right? Like, I'm sure you can get a representative, but they don't have everything that you've experienced and learned and thought of that you put into your art, that they are a totally separate person, right? So I feel like for myself, I want to take the step to represent my art, because I know everything there is, well, possibly to know, there is to know about my art. So yeah, I guess so. Like, it's hard though. It definitely is hard. When I was in fashion photography, I was I would say I was a lot shyer. I found it really hard to socialize. It was actually coming to NFT space that I found that I had taken on this role where I accepted myself a lot more. Maybe because I was just around dorkier people that I felt like I fit in with. Like, the fashion people were just too put together, and in the NFT space, in the art space, like, just there were so many other silly dorky artists like me that I was like, okay, this is where I belong. And I felt like after I had accepted who I am, like, just, I am very casual, I make very silly jokes, and I'm very blunt, and because I've accepted who I am, I've been able to be myself more, and I find that me being myself more has somehow attracted people to want to get to know me better. Like, I think they like the authentic side of myself, where I am, again, very city, very blunt, but people say I'm real, which I like to think is true. And it's something I want to be able to hold on to going forward too.
So Shavonne, you have 3 artworks that came out in association with NFT Factory Paris, and one of those is found at Collect Your Home. But I would love for you to take a step back. If someone is not aware of those 3 artworks, put yourself in that storytelling headspace and maybe tell that story here as to how you're thinking, okay, hey, behind the scenes, I have grinded and I have put in the time and I have put in the technical expertise, which I have, and I have created these 3 artworks from a place of passion. And now they have to see the light of day. And they're going to see the light of day on socials, and they're going to see the light of day to collectors. And in this case, they're also going to see the light of day in an exhibition format. How are you putting those pieces together?
Could you rephrase the question a little bit just so I could understand it one more time?
Yeah, so the segue from creation. So you've now created these 3 artworks, and now you're going to release them. How does that process unfold?
Okay, so I think, when in the creation period, sometimes I either have a concept in mind or I land on the concept while doing it. And it's sometimes it builds really like naturally. Well, other times I kind of like I have an idea, I'm just gonna like make that idea a visual of that idea itself. And the creation process, it's fun. It's a pain in the ass, obviously, but it's fun. It's 3D, so like I think there are a lot of steps that people don't expect to know of, and I don't expect them to know of, because 3D, unlike a lot of mediums where I think a lot of the steps are very much hidden. Because like if you think about painting, it's very obvious, someone took paint and put it on the canvas, right? Photography, even though like digital photography can be very technical, you can see someone has a camera and press the button, right? But with 3D, it's just like someone sat behind a computer for a really long time and then something happened out of that. And a lot of the steps are very much obstructed, right? You don't really see it. So like even for me, like I had to push myself to like, I need to record it. I kind of want to put it out there so people can kind of understand the steps that go behind it, which is a lot. But it's super fun. And at the end of it, I'll talk about these three pieces a little bit. So basically, when Marie Claire Arabia had approached me for this project, they kind of just told me that they wanted me to do 3 digital pieces for their editorial. And they gave me very, very vague guidelines, which is like, we want 3 different characters, one to be underwater, one in space, and one in nature, right? So that was all they gave me. And on my end, I was like, okay, cool. That means I have a lot of freedom. It sometimes can be a bit scary because like, oh my God, where do I go with that, right? And where I had decided to go with that for the concept is that, as little kids, we often have very fantastical dreams. Like I recently posted that like when I was younger, I wanted to be a real Pokemon trainer. Or but like, there's the others like, mermaid or like dinosaur hunter, etc. Right? Like fantastical dreams. And soon as you grow older, we were just like, okay, so that was a fantasy. But I think when I was creating these 3 pieces, I really wanted to push across the idea of like, how about let's bring this innocent fantastical dreams to life, right? So I had created the mermaid, I had created the woman who explores space, and I had created this forest nymph. And so like when I was displaying them and showing them at the exhibition, to me it was kind of important for me to be there to also share the story. Obviously everything has been written, but like even with my exhibitions that I've done this year, I really love giving artist tours because I really want them to be able to hear from me like what it is that I wanted to explain and wanted to bring across. Of course, like everybody will have their own interpretation, just that in my control freakness, I'm like, what if they interpret it wrong? I just want to make sure they know mine. Okay, I don't maybe you disagree, that's fine, like whatever your interpretation is, but like you can also know mine. So like for me, it's like I wanted people to know that like this was my take on it, right? Like because when they look at them, they'll be like, okay, there's a lady in space, that's cool, I like space. But I'm like, to me it's also like, look at how this is a vision of when dreams come true, and so for me, it's then explaining that in real life, it's then explaining that on Twitter, it's then explaining it on social media. And of course, at a certain point of time, you kind of just let go and like, all right, people will see what they see. And for me, I guess that's the part of like, at least no matter whatever they think the concept is, the aesthetic is good. Like the visual is strong enough that like it will have the story there. So I guess that is a long answer to your question.
Let me ask a follow-up. If you trace the line from the initial seed of the concept of your creation to first beginning the 3D process behind the computer, to all the hours involved, to declaring that this piece is done, to beginning the talk on socials, to talking in person at an exhibition, to ultimately finding it in a collector's arms, what is the single most fulfilling moment of an artwork to you?
Oh, I was split it between the second I finally think it's done and then when somebody appreciates it for what it is.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So I like that you keyed in on the importance, or you thinking it's important to be there to tell the story. You've had a chance to speak. You've had a chance to speak a bunch now in exhibitions and outright speeches, with your work with NFT Asia, which I want to talk about a little bit. How has that all come together?
Um, I guess for me, like it comes from the again, remember when I was talking about how I used to be scared about art? I think for me, now that I've taken on the role as an artist, I am trying my very best to not give anybody else that feeling. You know, like I want my art to be accessible. I want to be accessible as an artist. I want people to be able to speak to me and it not be that this air of mystery, because to be fair, I don't really have any air of mystery anyway. So you know, I want people to be able to look at my art, be able to resonate with it, be able to see themselves in it, and also be able to understand where I'm coming from in a very easy way. Like I don't think that my art is superficial. I just think that it is easy to understand, you know, and that is important to me, right? And I guess so much of it is just wanting to have that connection, because to me a lot of my art talks about human stories. I talk about love, I talk about loneliness, emotions, etc. And because my aim is to tell human stories with my 3D models, it'd be really sad if the humans looking at it can't connect with those stories, right? So I think to me, it is important that my art remains accessible and easy to understand. And so that's why I do all this talking and stuff. But I mean, like talking, it also came, it took a while. Like I remember when I started, you know, in 2021, and there's all the Clubhouse and Twitter spaces, it was hard still. Like I did it then, and I think those were good practice runs before I started doing them in real life. Um, so like I remember like having to do all these Twitter spaces, and like, you know, the heart going ta 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 the whole time, and just doing it until you've said something so many times that you are comfortable saying it in front of no matter how many people, right? So I think it's a practice. Most of us, I would assume, just don't do it naturally. Like speaking to people isn't easy, and presenting something that you care about is not always, you know, smooth. But we try and we do our best.
I like that theme of repetition. Again, it's approachability and it's repetition, right? You're breaking it down to its simplest concept, but then also just encouraging. It's not going to be, maybe not feel comfortable or not be perfect at first. Just keep going. Literally, just keep going.
Yeah.
So solo exhibition, we talked a lot about, we talked some about your one-of-one work. You've also done some edition work and you've done some collaborations, and I want to touch on each of those a bit. And from the edition side, I'd love to talk about your Love is Love collection. And I'll first go with the headline. How did it feel, that moment of fulfillment, to see Idris Elba collect Love is Love?
It was an insane moment, right? Like, cause it was really funny, cause I had somebody text me. They said, "Congrats on the Idris Elba buy," and I remember going on Twitter and like, now I don't see anything. And then I realized that it was he had posted it on his TikTok and then on his Instagram, of which like they were just not places I had checked for anything NFT related, right? So like when my friend said that, I was just like confused, and I was like, oh, I thought, you know, must be a mistake. So by the time I had found out that Idris Elba bought my work, it was 11 hours after, which is like so crazy, right? Yeah, but like, you know, he had posted this video of him in a makeup chair, just casually saying that he's buying his first NFT, and thereby Shavonne Wong. Like he said my name twice, which I feel like I should cut and put it into a record and like make it like maybe my alarm when I wake up in the morning. So I hear Idris Elba waking me up. Like that sounds cool, right? But yeah, like, you know, when I first saw that video, I had to ask my husband to come have a look. And he freaked out because he's actually a bigger fan than I am. Yeah, to be fair, like I think it's just one of the insane things that has happened to me ever since I entered the NFT space, right? Like to me, it's also such a key thing about opportunities. Like when you're in a new space, like you just have insane opportunities like this happen. Like to me, like having my work at the Venice Biennale, having done Vogue's NFT, having Idris Elba as a collector, like all of this like is all completely insane. Like all of them batshit insane, but like they have all happened, right? Because of like this new space that is the NFT scene. So yeah, no, still blown away.
Did you ever get the story of discoverability? In other words, how did Idris Elba first come across your work?
So I actually did not ask him this question, but I assume a story because on the day that he bought it, Love is Love was shown on featured at the front page of OpenSea. And this goes back to all what I was talking about co-emailing, right? So story time. When OpenSea, when I had, so like back in 2021, whenever I had anything that was show like minted or shown on OpenSea, I would tag them. So I tag them a lot, like tag them. And then one day they finally followed me. So when they followed me, I would DM them. I'll like feature me. I'll DM them, DM them, DM them, DM them. I'll be like, hey, saw this post, feature me. Hey, saw that. Wanna feature me? And they'd be like, oh, Chinese New Year, I'm Asian, feature me. Basically finding whatever reason to be like, feature me. Until one day they gave me an email. And then once they gave me the email, I then emailed the email and like, hey, hello, feature me, feature me, feature me. Until one day, I guess they were like, oh my gosh, she just won't stop. Fine, we'll feature her. And I think that was the day that Idris Elba saw it.
I mean, how good of a story is that? That's really, really good. And I think there's a decent chance you're spot on with that read. And I think that speaks to repetition, that you were willing to get yourself out there over and over again, and it came
And
through.
being cringe.
And being cringe, and then immediately it was rewarded in such an epic scenario that I imagine you won't forget, and I won't forget, and a lot of people who were there when and saw it come across. There are finite examples. I mean, there are incredible opportunities, and we can count on a couple different hands those shocker scenarios, but that was definitely one of them where we all realized together that there was a lot of attention on the things that were happening. And had a chance on this show to speak to Ryan Copeman's a couple episodes ago, and his moment was Jim Carrey purchasing his work. And what was fascinating about that, which is the same thing here, is these two things came out of the clear blue sky, and the story was told afterwards as how the pieces came together. But in the moment, it served as such a surprise, which I find so fun.
Yeah, like I remember Ryan's one with Jim Carrey was like, holy shit, that's super cool. Yeah, like how does this ever happen? Like, this is super cool. Yeah.
And another one, and maybe we trade a couple here, but another one that comes to my mind because it's such a fun topic was Too Much Lag. Do you remember his collaboration with Will Smith coming through?
Yes.
That was a shocker in the moment.
Yeah, I remember watching a video of like Will Smith in the video, and then running through the walls, just like, oh, that's super fun. Yeah, and I guess for me it was just, I think it was also that I don't know, as a 3D artist, like I am here in Singapore in my little room, just like sitting in front of the computer for way too long, for a long period of time, and then suddenly like this Hollywood star knows who I am, like knows I exist, like that itself is the crazy part. Is like, yeah, like he's always been like, all these Hollywood stars are caricatures to me, like they just belong in the screen. They are not in the same world I live in, even though I know they physically are in the same world I live in. But like, this is the first time there was this like connection where they are, so it's kind of insane.
Another thing you do a great job of is education. And you're very clear, you're to the point, and you're also convicted. And I always get the sense reading you that you've thought about what you're saying. I'm trying to think about the exact Twitter post that you made recently. I think it was just talking about digital asset ownership and that it makes sense, period. And you had some words on exactly why, but just talk about education and conviction, and maybe how your own thoughts have come together around digital ownership, artwork ownership, and what makes sense and what doesn't.
So I think I've been very fortunate because I am married to my husband who thinks a lot and talks a lot. and so we will have like all this breakfast conversation that goes on for hours, right? Like we'll find a topic that's interesting and we'll go back and forth on it, and like we'll and so like sometimes people will be like, wow, you thought about this? Because like, no, I just had really, really long conversations about it. And I think it has been super interesting for me as a creative coming into this crypto space, right? Because I always tell people that like my past 2 years, as much as I've learned about technology, I feel like I've learned more about humans, in general, right? Like for me, when I remember entering the space, before I had entered it, my husband would tell me about crypto. I would be a supportive wife making supportive sounds, because I had no idea what he was saying. But like he would tell me lines like, you gotta be your own bank, and I was like, oh, that sounds so nice. What a nice tagline. And then I remember I entered the NFT space, I had to send something over MetaMask, and I'm like, fuck this shit. I don't want to be my own bank. Like I need someone to be able to call. Like this is terrifying, right? And so like to me, that self-sovereignty thing was a bit like, I don't know, we'll see. And then when the Canadian truckers protest happened, to me, it was when I was like, oh shit, first world country in 2022. Like this is not like, oh, somewhere else in the world, and like and the government's super corrupt, and they, whatever, right, took away the money. To me, it's just like, okay, like it's Canada. So like it was for me, that was when I started to realize like, oh, maybe there is something to it, right? And so many of the crypto ethos to me has been that sort of thing. Whereas like it's kind of understanding how people view things, this understanding the propaganda that is in the space and is outside, and how the media has, all of that, right? Where you're like, okay, is this a silver hat I'm putting on my head, or like are we talking about something right now? And all of that has been super interesting, because like it's such a fun conversation to have, especially with my husband, right? Like because he's from another side of the world, so like we have very different views on many things. And so like for me, him being in crypto, and then me being from this outside space coming in, I think we've had a lot of really fun conversations. And then sometimes, when it clicks for me, it feels like, oh, okay, I should share this thing that clicked for me. And so like a lot of my Twitter posts, a lot of my Twitter threads really comes from that. Just a summary of like something that's clicked for me. Yeah.
And do you feel yourself gaining traction around all? I mean, that's just my rough perception, is that Shavonne Wong is out there gaining traction, not only for her art, but for her mind and for her conviction in sharing those types of things. Do you feel that? Is that palpable to you too?
Sometimes people say that I share really good things, and my ego becomes very happy about it. So I would like to think so too.
Good. I'm glad. I'm glad it comes through. I'm glad it's recognized. Here's a curveball. Let's get into the technical weeds. What's the number one most underrated part of your 3D process? 3D is near and dear to my heart and Artifact's heart. And I'm just curious, from your computer chair and the time you said it's a little harder, like you said, to grasp. A painter, paint on canvas. A photographer, the click of a button that is visible. The 3D artist, a lot of time in a computer chair. What's the number one most underrated aspect of that process?
Hair. Like hair is the worst.
I knew it was going to be hair. Shout out Blake Catherine. I think you would agree.
Hair is the worst thing ever. I feel like hair is a pain in real life, in 2D, in 3D, like every aspect of life. Like hair, hate it. But I've gotten better at it, so I kind of love it. But I still hate it. Yeah, it's a mix.
Hair, immediate answer.
Yeah.
Okay, let's jump back. I mentioned I wanted to get to your edition work, but also your collaborations. And one that is also near and dear to me is with Time and with Deepak Chopra, and how much fun that was to all come together.
Yes, that was super fun, and like, thank you again of thinking of me. Appreciate that.
Always, of course, yeah.
Yeah, that was super fun. And I remember when we were doing that 3D version, and then I realized that some people were doing covers. I was like, oh my god, am I supposed to do a cover to it? I remember I panicked a little bit. I was like, wait, am I supposed to do both? But it was super fun to work on both, because like again, that era thing was the first time I had to think in that sort of way, because like I've never done anything that has to do with real-time engines, right? Like so Unreal and Unity, I've never touched them. So like that was the very first time where like I got to work with you guys to do something that could be moved in real time. And then of course learning like what the obstacles are and what are the ways that to deal with it. It was all super interesting. Actually, it was kind of educational for me. And then working on the cover was also super fun. Where I was doing the hands. Nobody's looking at me right now, but like I'm doing a lot of hands because the cover had a lot of hands, where it was just like sand. It was like infinity sand, right? I don't know. It was fun. Both was really fun, and I appreciate again you having me there.
Of course. And talk a little bit more about the totality of 3D, because you just mentioned real-time engines and the education process around them. Where is 3D going? And you can answer that question in two ways. One, with respect to your own work, which is asked another way, where are you going with the future of your 3D work? But also, where do you envision the space, but even larger than that, the world goes with 3D expression?
Mm. I think real time is the future, and I think that right now, what is actually holding us back isn't really that the technology isn't there, but it's the fact that people have shitty hardware in general. Like civilians have shitty hardware. Like if we once like we can make something look amazing on this wonderful computer, right? But not everybody else's computer can compute that, right? So it's like trying to play something that was created for the iPhone on a Nokia. It's just not going to work. And I think that's the issue, right? It's just going to take time for that to catch up. And in the meantime, as what most people's devices can do is that at the state they are, they cannot handle very, very realistic looking models, which are mine. So that saddens me. But I feel like that's where the future is going, and I want to learn a bit more about real time because I definitely am more interested in interactive art. I think, for me, coming to the NFT space, being a digital artist, one of the things that excite me the most is technology. To me, like technology is always moving, it's always innovating. And as even though I have half of me that's like terrified because I feel like I can never catch up, like the other half is just like super excited because every time like there's new things that come out, it just means there's new tools for me to play with. And if I view them as just like, I don't know, toys, like things I can play with, like it becomes really exciting because like, holy shit, what can I do now that I previously could not do, right? So I guess like I want to go into more interactive stuff because I also want to be able to tell stories in different ways. I want to be able to talk about VR, I want to talk about AR, but as of now, just a little bit difficult. So it's going to take some time. Yeah.
And also extending your point, it's not just people lacking the hardware, it's also even the how we view it on a flat screen, meaning for a long time in the space, we could name a couple platforms that we were viewing these incredibly intricate artworks in these little tiny boxes, and
Yes.
sometimes not in the resolution intended. And if you think about how silly that is comparatively to how it will look in 5, 10, 15 years, as again, not only do we have the hardware, but we also have people prioritizing the visual experience of these things.
Yes, yes, definitely. And like, I mean, AR, VR, I think right now is we're just waiting for the Google or the Apple VR headsets to be less clunky, like when the technology is able to reach a stage where, it's like wearing glasses where it's not this thing
Mhm.
that you have to put on your head and it's heavy. I think that's gonna change a lot in the future. I think AR is probably gonna be a huge thing first, and then VR catches up after that.
Taking a step all the way back to your origin coming into the space, we talked a lot about your recent artwork collections, collaborations. But what was the first piece that you minted, and how did you decide to enter the blockchain?
So I have these two pieces that are like my stepchildren that I never really ever talk about because like they were the first two that I was just really just testing out the space. So like they were not really serious pieces. But of course they are collected by NorCal guy. um, but they are like my stepchildren that I never really talk about because like one of the pieces about the bull market and the other piece about the bear market. It's just with crypto Chad as the main character. They're silly. They're very, very silly. Like my to me, I really started is with my Luna Moon series on Foundation. But the truth is I had stepchildren before this.
Well, you know how I feel about that series on foundations, but one of my top, loosely speaking, top 10 artworks that have struck me in the space, the one specifically owned by Anesti,
Yes.
that's near and dear and very close to my heart. But I do love to hear about these stepchildren because I actually did not know that. Fun fact, and NorCal has been a guest of the Future of Art, so now we're forging this familial relationship where he owns your first two stepchildren.
Yeah, and like the first, it was kind of funny because like again, I don't ever really talk about them because like I am kind of embarrassed by their existence. And it was like the first person I think I told was NorCal, because like they were on Rarible, and one of them had been bought by someone else, and so I was telling NorCal about them like months later, and then he went and bought it and bought the other one. It was just like, it was, anyway, my stepchildren. Yeah, not my real children. Not at all. They get nothing from me.
But NorCal guy, you're stuck with them, so.
Yes, exactly.
I still think I always, even the pieces, and I'm sure everyone has them to an extent, but even the pieces that we are slightly embarrassed by, or it's like a abandoned music, right? That sort of abandons their first album because their sound has evolved so much since that moment. To me, at least, as someone who loves storytelling, absolutely loves storytelling, I find that to be a beautiful part of the story all the same.
Yeah, but like if you see it though, they're hilarious.
You're like,
I,
whatever.
yeah, you know what? I'll send it to you later. But like they are funny. It's, yeah, they're like funny stepchildren.
So Shavonne, how would you describe your future path, where you stand today, coming off your solo exhibition with your 3 new one of ones? What does the future hold? How do you view blockchain relative to other expressions of your artwork in the future?
Yeah, okay. So for me, I think right now, like I've done my solo exhibitions, I've been very happy with them. Someone I was just speaking to someone today, like, what do you want next, right? I'm like, I guess for me, I'm just like very casual. It's like, oh, museums. I'll find a museum to get into. Uh, I have no idea how. To be fair, I am also very quick to admit that because I am still new to the art world, I am learning a lot about how the art world works, and I have no idea how one gets into a museum. But I am just gonna put it out there that one day I'll try and get myself in there. But I guess on other than that, to me, digital art has been around for such a long time, right? Like it's been around long before the blockchain, it's been around long before NFTs, but it was because of the blockchain that like they are validated for the provenance and yada yada. And so for me, I think that I am probably likely to continue minting most of my digital work on the blockchain just because it keeps to the provenance of it all, right? People can kind of keep track of what I'm doing, the different things that I've gone into, how I've explored the space. So yeah, I think I will still want to be minting, definitely. I'm just thinking perhaps like for me exploring more of like the interactive art, um, and just trying to do new things all the time.
I am very much looking forward, whatever the date is, whether it's 2 years, 5 years, 20 years from now, when you tell a very similar story about a museum as the one you told about OpenSea. Think, hey,
Yes.
hey, I'm here. I'm here. And I have absolutely no doubt that if you keep going in the way that you have, that you will find that door. I, I think it's inevitable that digital art, in whatever way, shape, or form it does, has a massively larger footprint in museums within a certain time frame. And so it's just a matter of how that happens, who that happens on behalf of, who the movers and shakers are. Obviously, all that stuff will be figured out in due time.
Yeah, I agree with that. I remember like I saw a tweet that was complaining that the museums these days are not updated yet to showing digital art. And to me, I guess so much of museum is it kind of documents like things that are happening, and whatever's happening in the NFT space is still very, very, very new in the span of the history of art. So like I think, it's an eventual thing. It's just gonna take some time. Yeah.
And that's such a healthy perspective. I mean, for a couple years there, we were all in the mindset to some extent of a day felt like a month, a week felt like a year, whatever the right, whatever the right mathematical equation. I think we were all living in a time warp and geared to thinking that something would happen relatively overnight. And I think yours
Yeah.
is a mindset that's very healthy for people to adopt.
Yeah, I think like the more I start to understand also about the trade world, I realize how insanely fast we have been moving. And so I think with that, knowing that, I think it helps with the expectations of what's to come, right? That like just because we are insane doesn't mean the whole world's insane, right? Just because we are the main characters doesn't mean they are the same. So they're not gonna like just move really quickly to catch up with us. I think it's just we have to cater a little bit to how the time frames museums move, which is, you know, slow, and that's fine. Because you don't, it would be weird for a museum to start displaying stuff that doesn't have good history or track record yet, in my opinion. Yeah.
It's also healthy for different timescales to play out in different places where relative open sea, it's happening in the blink of an eye from second to second, minute to minute. And it can be that way, and it's empowered to be that way. And then galleries, that type of a tier of artwork distribution, a little bit slower in nature, takes a little bit more time, but yet still they responded pretty fast. If we really think about it, when NFTs began to take off within a calendar year, we started to see them break into Christie's and Sotheby's. And now there are, different divisions dedicated to them. And then museums, I think it's healthy to have something that exists on a slower time scale where it starts to happen through donations, the museum's willing to entertain those donations, how that all gets brokered behind the scenes. And then inevitably those doors will just go from cracked open to blown wide open.
Yeah, definitely agree with that.
Shavonne, your words of advice to a fellow artist in the space. I've been having a number of these dialogues recently. I think everyone's in the same boat. Well, not everyone that remains, right? Because it's a bit of a slower time, yet we see every single day there are opportunities. There are still plenty of opportunities. I think we share a belief that this is heading in the right direction. And from a philosophical standpoint, digital ownership makes a whole heck of a lot of sense to be part of the future. With all that in mind, let's say someone's still here and they're fighting the good fight and just existing through a little bit of a slower time. What's your advice to a fellow artist?
I would say I think it's the way you view the space, right? Like again, earlier we talked about entitlement of like thinking you deserve anything. I think thinking you deserve anything is always going to be difficult, and it's going to be hard because like there are many people in the world who work incredibly hard and never really get anywhere in life. So to me, working hard is basically putting more lots in the lottery of life, right? You are just trying to get lucky, but you are trying to give yourself as many chances as possible to be lucky. And another one would be probably that think of Twitter as the way that you convey and brand yourself. So if you are constantly complaining, like that never helps anybody, and people read it and they remember it, and that's not how you want people to see you. So whatever you're willing to put out there, make sure it's what you want people to see you with, but also have a group of friends that you can vent to and complain to, because it is an insane space and sometimes a little stupid. and you need to be able to complain about the stupidity that you see in this space. And I think that done privately is a good thing.
Healthy, very healthy. I think that's a great mental model to strongly consider what you put out on a consistent basis as forming a narrative in others' minds as to who you are and how that may differentiate itself from, having that safer space to vent, where we all need that from time to time. But maybe there's a differentiation between those two things. I think that's very, very healthy. How about your words to your collector base and collectors in general? I mean, how do you feel as someone who's so steeped in the space and believes in its future? What would be your commentary to collectors?
Thank you. Thank you for believing in me and my plan. And I believe I will is to continue making you proud. So that's it.
Beautiful. Shavonne, who should be on the Future of Art? Who should be a future guest here?
Cyber Yu.
A lot of respect for Yu lately. I don't know exactly when his account popped onto my radar, but it was relative. It was within the past few months, but it has been certainly a few months now, and a lot of the commentary is giving me similar vibes, like Shavonne Wong vibes, like has it together, convicted in where it's all going.
Yeah. I say him.
Okay, done and done. Let's make it happen for sure. Let's make it happen. And Shavonne,
but wait, do I get more votes though, or do I only get one vote?
Well, you get one major vote, but if you do want to shout some other people out. by all means.
Well, then like everybody in my Bloom community, where there's like Hannah's and like there's Christian, there's Stefan, like I just all of them.
All of them. Okay.
All of them.
We'll work on it over time. Work,
Roger, work.
Let's go. Let's pick up the pace. So let's say, Shavonne, that someone is listening to this and has vibed with you, but is less familiar with your work. If you could clean slate, send them to anywhere, why don't you break that down? Where should people go to explore Shavonne Wong outside of your Twitter X account?
They can go to my website, which is shavonnewong.art. Everything's on it. Like I have my projects insights on it. I have like my updates that I update every 6 months, so you can kind of be kept up to date to like with the things I've done, the things I've been busy with, and the thoughts I have behind all the works I do. And also I also have a page where it basically filters out like works that are available, not available. So yeah, there.
That's the one. I was on there today. I like how, again, approachable and simple it is. Like you really lay it out for people. You do a nice job with that, with the decks that you mentioned earlier. I think really leading the way and understanding that simple is better in a lot of instances, because everyone is busy, but you're making it easier. And Shavonne, last question before we leave, on the sillier side or the super inspiring side, you can treat it whatever you want. What's an input lately that outside of the space that has inspired you, made you laugh, and that you want to hand over to somebody else to improve their day?
Wait, what's an input that I would want to hand to someone else?
So an input could be a song, a book, an article.
Oh, because like as you were explaining like the things, and before you said hand it off to someone else, I was like, oh, my husband.
Curveball.
So not my husband, no. Also not my cat. No, I've got nothing to give anybody. Like, go find your own input.
Beautiful. Well said. We'll take it. Shavonne Wong, it has been, again, a long time coming. I'm so glad we spent the time. You really are someone who inspires me. You really do. You inspire me on a daily basis. And it's an oft occurrence that you'll say something or present something that makes me think, and just keep doing what you're doing, keep opening the doors. And like I said, whatever time scale it requires, I cannot wait to see you break into a museum one day.
Thank you so much, Roger. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening and for being part of the future of art. If you liked the episode, please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite platform, and onward to the many conversations that await us. The Future of Art is produced by Artifex. Artifex, ARTIFEX, was created to honor today's top digital fine artists in 3 dimensions. Each artist's one-of-one work of art becomes a collectible 3D sculpture and centerpiece of an immersive world built in Unreal Engine, the creation tool of Epic Games. Search Artifex Viewer on Apple and download our brand new free app to experience the sculptures in augmented reality, and visit artifex.art/unreal to literally step inside the art on your browser.